Attention BetMGM customers. Have a friend who loves sports as much as you do? Here's a chance for both of you to earn a $50 bonus when they sign up through BetMGM's Refer a Friend program. Just sign into your BetMGM account and click on the Refer a Friend program to send your friend a message inviting them to register a new account in the same state you use BetMGM in. Once your friend signs up and makes a deposit, they'll receive a $50 bonus. And once your friend places a bet with their bonus and the wager is settled, you'll receive a $50 bonus as well. Share the excitement and get a $50 bonus every time you refer a friend to BetMGM. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. Must be 21 years of age or older to wager. New Jersey only. New and existing customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets. Bonus bets expire in 30 days. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Final Four is Not on the Schedule. I'm your host Eric, alongside with expert analyst Rod. Thanks for joining us on the best MSU basketball podcast featuring in-depth recruiting, game matchup, and post-game analysis. We dive deep to give you the best tools to enjoy the Spartans and impress your friends and family. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod. We're here to talk about Michigan State's 80-65 win at the Breslin Center on a late night on Tuesday as Michigan State returned to the court after the tragedy last week. Before we begin, I just want to remind everyone that, I know there's a snowstorm coming and I had to drive through the beginnings of it maybe tonight. Fortunately, I'm glad that tonight was a game and not tomorrow night, because it sounds like we're getting, at least on this end of the state, we're getting about 9 inches of snow and some freezing rain and all kinds of nonsense. But actually, spring is actually close. It is coming. And that means it's going to be more rain, and make sure your gutters are taken care of. And so if you want to make sure that your gutters are in good condition, clean up the leaves, clean all the junk, make sure you don't have standing water. Maybe you need them actually replaced like I did. Please be sure to call Kurt Stauffer and his team over Brothers that just do gutters. So he wanted to go into business of something that people don't, specialize in, excel in. You kind of have fly-by-the-night sort of operations. So he wanted to pick one that, is reputable, and they actually do high-quality work. And so that's why he bought his franchise for Brothers That Just Do Gutters. They're a nationwide company. And anyway, if you're on the west side of the state in the Grand Rapids area, which spans all the way out to the lakeside, all the way from to Saugatuck and up north to Rockford out to Lowell, if that's your area and you need gutter work, or you maybe have some questions about it, maybe even just getting some, leaf guards on your gutters because you're tired of cleaning them out, give Kurt a call. If you contact him, just mention Final Four, that you heard it here, and you'll get 10% off your quote. You can reach him at kurtz.stauffer@brothersgutters.com. That's KURT.STAUFFER@brothersgutters.com. And there'll be a link to this, obviously, in the show notes and in the podcast player. So let's talk about this game. Michigan State scored 13 points in the first 12 and a half minutes of the game, maybe. And then went on a blistering pace from there, scoring 67 points in the last 27 minutes. A game that was a good Indiana team that is not as good on the road, obviously, but they looked pretty good. I mean, they were hitting threes, and they shot the ball well, considering that Michigan State beat them by 15. But there were a number of things that was in Michigan State's favor. Obviously, as we've mentioned before, they hit a lot of threes. And Tyson Walker really got them out of the doldrums early in that first half and shot them. I mean, he was shooting from the logo, and he was, I think, Israel after the game was joking that he was complaining because the only shot that Tyson missed was like a layup. If he was inside 30 feet, he was too close. But he was really good, 4 3-pointers that first half. And then after that, things just started clicking. And then the defense on Trayce Jackson-Davis was really good. He got his 19 points, but he wasn't dominant. He had 7 turnovers. They really had him confused, and at least made it difficult for him to get the ball out. And anyway, I think it was a good game. It's if you just ignore the first 12 minutes of the game. But even there, you could say that Michigan State was able to keep in contact with Indiana, not let Indiana get away with the game early on. And so, I mean, there are all kinds of things about this game that they did really well. So I'll just let you kind of start out, I guess, but with that, brief little recap.
Yeah, I think Jay Billis had it nailed that a lot of the early offensive struggle was down to Michigan State not playing with pace. Now, normally when we talk about pace here, we're usually talking about transition, going up and down the floor. But there's another way that matters, and that's the pace at which you're running your half-court offense. And we've talked about it different ways here at times this season. When Michigan State gets stagnant, when you start seeing a lot of dribbleitis, you don't have ball and man movement occurring at the pace that it needs to. And so Billis's point, it was a good one, was that because Michigan State wasn't playing with sufficient pace, it was easy for Indiana to guard them, or easier, because the ball's not moving side to side. Men are not moving with purpose and with aggression. And that led to a lot of the problems. Now, you could say, well, they just weren't making shots. It's not that simple. And then sometimes you say, well, what changes it? You hope that what happens is guys just realize it and start to find themselves and play with more of a purpose, play more insistently, play more aggressively, play faster. But sometimes you just need someone to kind of drag everybody else with them. And I think initially that someone was Tyson Walker. I mean, without a doubt, Tyson Walker, as you said, hit some shots that were pro shots tonight.
Yeah.
They were. I mean, they just, and this is something we know about him, and we've talked about it from time to time over the last 2 years. He is a guy who is fully capable of putting the offense on his back for a while and going and getting his own offense. And you saw that evidenced, especially in that first half run where Michigan State needed somebody to kickstart them. And he was that guy. And then I think the guy that followed him up was Jaxon Kohler. Jaxon Kohler had a really good game. I mean, you are seeing the progress that he's making at both ends. He is much more confident offensively. He is, I'm not saying he's going to remind anybody of Xavier Tillman or Antonio Smith anytime soon, but we are seeing him make strides defensively. You know, he had to, it was basically a two-man show at the center tonight because Carson Cooper sprained his ankle. They don't seem to think it was serious. It happened in practice. He landed on Mady Sissoko's foot, apparently. He didn't play tonight. Doesn't sound to me like it's a long-term thing. And the way they were sounding, I might even expect him to play this weekend in Iowa City. But for tonight, it was basically going to be those two guys and getting a very, very tough assignment against the guy he's no worse than the second best player in the Big Ten this year. And over the last 3 weeks, I think he's been the best in Trayce Jackson-Davis. And Jaxon Kohler held his own. The job he did rebounding, the job this entire team did, coming off a really the Ohio State game gets kind of lost in the shuffle because of everything that's happened. But it was the one thing MSU didn't do well in that game in Columbus. I think they gave up 12 offensive boards to Ohio State. And then Michigan, of course, tattooed them in Ann Arbor. So they really needed this kind of effort. But Jaxon Kohler was a big part of that, especially the job he did in the first half. And he got them a couple buckets, held up defensively, and was a force on the board. So those two guys, I think, were really, really important and got MSU going. And then when that happened, then you saw everybody else kick in. You saw A.J. Hoggard. Really, I mean, A.J. was not good to begin the game, but over those last 26 and change that you talked about, A.J. Hoggard was fantastic.
He was really good,
I thought he was great tonight. The way he ran things, the way he balanced looking for his own offense and finishing plays, drawing contact, and balance that with finding others for baskets. They got good contributions out of Malik Hall and Joey Hauser. Mady Sissoko, I thought, played a really good game. Defensively and on the boards, he showed up. Some of the plays he made defensively, that shot block, and then there was another play where the game was still at a point where IU maybe was starting to see some momentum. I think it might have been a
break, right?
A 7-point spread. Yes, IU was in transition, and Trayce Jackson-Davis was alone under the basket, and Mady busted his ass to deflect that pass out of bounds and prevent a dunk. A small moment, but it was big. He had the other play where it didn't end up resulting in Michigan State possession, but it was one of those moments where if that dive on the floor from the loose ball, if that had happened in front of Izzo, he would have given him a hug.
Yeah,
I know it. So Mady really showed up. Jaden Akins, didn't have a huge scoring game, but he hit a couple threes. I thought played a good floor game. And then they got, Trey Holloman had played a limited role, but he did score 3 points, made a 3-point play, and I thought was solid in his time out there. So it seems to me like maybe he's getting past that little slump that he was in, where he wasn't quite as effective in terms of running the offense and defending. He seems to be back now, or at least heading that direction. So really did. I mean, just about everybody. The only guy really did make a solid contribution was Pierre Brooks, and he barely played. So, this was really a team win. But I think if you want to look at the two guys who were really responsible for dragging Michigan State out of the mud, it was Tyson Walker and Jaxon Kohler.
No question. I mean, Kohler had 5 offensive rebounds. That's crazy. Out of 10 for Michigan State.
And this is a guy, there were people that were honestly claiming that he was the worst rebounding big Izzo's ever had. I don't know what they were watching. I mean, statistically, it wasn't the case. I could cite multiple guys, but you're starting to see lately how he can be effective. And it's his, for lack of a better term, I honestly think it's a similar thing to what makes him an effective player offensively. It's his understanding, his intuitive basketball IQ. He, man to man, he can't match Trayce Jackson-Davis at this point.
Few can.
He's not as strong. Yeah, right. He's not, but I mean, physically, especially. But, Billis kept talking about it during the broadcast about how effectively both Mady and Jackson, but I think especially Jackson, were doing a good job with their lower body kind of wedging Trayce into positions where he was a little too far under the rim, and they weren't. And that's a subtle thing that if you could do that effectively, it can make up for the fact that you're not 7'1", you're not, 270 pounds of muscle, and you don't jump through the roof, all of which apply to Jackson. It's playing a smart brand of basketball, and he really did that tonight. So I was very impressed with the job he did, and you talk about rebounding, which we'll come back to in the keys, but man, MSU limited IU to 5 offensive rebounds and had 10 themselves. So doubled them up. And, I will say this. I thought that was one area of the game. I don't want to take anything away from the job that Michigan State did, but I do think, we talked about it in the preview. Maybe IU a little bit tired, Trayce Jackson-Davis in particular, maybe not the full reservoir. Now look, a team on their home floor kind of kicking your ass can take a lot of energy away from you as well. But I didn't think he or the team play. If you remember that game in Bloomington, Indiana just from the jump was physical, energized. Again, some of that can be explained by home versus road, but I do think maybe, the tread on the tires is starting to get a little bit thin right at this point in the season for them, and for him in particular, because he's had to play so many minutes. I mean, they sat him for the final 2 minutes of this one, but other than that, I mean, I didn't look at what his
35
total
minutes.
minutes were. They had to be really high. 35, and he sat the last like 2 and change. So truthfully, he played just about the whole game. I mean, they barely sat him. There was one stretch where I remember they went with Malik Renault at the center, and that was it. Other than that, it was TJD all the time. And so it's easy to understand why his gas tank might be getting a little bit depleted. And you could make an argument that that was a factor in the rebounding. Now, they didn't look like a tired team shooting the ball, because they actually shot really well. Defensively, I thought they tried to compete. It's just Michigan State was just, once they got humming, it just didn't stop. And I don't just mean the 3-point shooting, although that was a huge part of it. I just mean in general, the ball and bodies started moving the way you want to see it. And boy, it it made a difference. But I do think, again, the rebounding was one area where I thought maybe IU was just not quite at their usual energy level.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like in many ways, I don't want to compare Jaxon Kohler to Tom Skith here, but I think in some ways just that the sort of the instinctive knowledge of where to be on the shots for rebounds or for even to get entry passes and things like that. He definitely has that. You can certainly see it. We talked about before that, he's got that, he's played a lot of basketball and he has a look to score. I thought when it was really stark, and I even sent you a message in the game, when Hood Schifino left the game with the second foul with about 6 minutes to go. That's when, everything turned around. It was partly Michigan State was hitting shots for sure. And even though they had Galloway trying to guard Walker, it didn't matter because, he's like 30 feet out from the hoop. But offensively, Indiana just couldn't get anything. They just looked just out of sorts. I mean, they scored a couple times, but they really didn't do much of anything when he left. And when he came back, in the second half, he scored a little bit, but then Michigan State shot the lights out. They hit the first 5 threes or something. The first 5 possessions was nuts, and that game was kind of over at that point. So it was a really stark contrast. I was surprised at how poor Indiana looked without Hood Schifino in there, and that's where you're going the Xavier Johnson people say, well, if you had Xavier Johnson, he could have been in there and would have been better than Galloway. But I guess you like you said, we talked about it, but it was impressive how much it changed things, and I was impressed at how Michigan State attacked it so well.
Yeah, I think that I've talked about this for a while. Guard play to me is the limiter for IU in terms of their March ambitions. They're a good team, and you saw that tonight. Yeah. I mean, I didn't think they played badly. Michigan State was just better. Kind of similar in some ways, the mirror image of the game in Bloomington, where I didn't think MSU was bad. I just thought Indiana was really, really good that day. Hood Schifino actually tonight was really good when he was on the floor. It's kind of this one-on, one-off sort of thing, which I talked about in the preview. Well, tonight was an on game for him when he was on the court. Now, he didn't do much in terms of creating for teammates. He only had 1 assist, but he made some tough shots, which he's been very capable of doing this whole year. A 6'7" guy who can go get his own shot, that's a tough cover because he's got the size to elevate over most anybody who's going to be likely guarding him and get a clean look, even if you're quote unquote contesting it. And so he's done that all year long. He did that tonight. And you're right. They looked very different with him running the show versus when they had to go to Galloway. The Xavier Johnson thing, again, it's going to be really interesting to me because they're running. The other thing is I thought he was going to be back by now. They're kind of running out of time. They've got what? I think they've got 3 games, 3 Big Ten games left. And then the Big Ten tournament. That's not a lot of time to reacclimate him. So you would think at a minimum what that means is even if he came back the next game, he's probably not going to be stepping into a large role.
Yeah.
But you never know. I know this. when Hood Schifino is good, Indiana is good,
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking. And I wouldn't want to be screwing with that too much. Now, the problem comes in what happens when he's not good,
Right.
because that does happen too. And you did see tonight, they don't really have a lot of answers right now besides him. You're also correct in saying that I think the reactions of some people will be, well, Xavier Johnson at least gives you the potential for an answer on those days. Yeah, he does. And if he's willing to accept being used in that kind of role and being a limited usage guy, then maybe it can work. But,
Yeah.
that all remains to be seen. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, I think Hood Schifino was really good. I thought Galloway, despite not doing a great job getting the offense humming, did play a pretty good game.
Yeah, he was 3 for 5 for 3
overall. Yeah, and he was okay defensively. I mean, as you said, nobody was stopping Tyson Walker tonight, but he had some moments defensively. I think, to me, honestly, when I look at what Michigan State's defense and Indiana's offense did that was key in this game, here's the biggest number to me: 13. That's the number of shots from the floor Trayce Jackson-Davis had. He got up 20 in the game in Bloomington, and he shot a boatload of free throws. In this game, he was 3 for 6 at the line. You're used to him because his motor is so high. You're used to him creating a lot of free throw opportunities for himself. He draws a lot of fouls, creates a lot of contact. Michigan State didn't foul him very much tonight. At the same time, limited the number of opportunities he had to get shots. And I thought it was really, really effective the way they elected to play him. I mean, we can talk about that more when we get into the keys, but early on, you saw some hard doubling coming from the 4. And there was a play early on, maybe in the first 5 minutes or so, where Race Thompson just kind of put himself right under the rim, got a pass from Trayce and dunked it. The hard doubling stopped soon after that. And instead, Michigan State used very judicious digs from the perimeter to disrupt him, to make it tough on him to ever get into a rhythm. And yet they never really lost too much contact with IU shooters.
Yep.
Not to the point like they did in Bloomington at times. I thought that was the key, though. If you limit that guy to 13 shots from the floor and 6 free throw attempts, you've done a job. You have done a defensive job. And I really, that's why Indiana's shooting numbers look pretty good in this game. So you might be tempted to think, well, MSU didn't do very much defensively, but I say not the case. Yeah. You got to look a little deeper. The one guy who can put them on his shoulders, on his back, and just drag them to the finish line, MSU did not let him do that. By the way, it's worth mentioning, I'm assuming that ESPN stats were correct on this. He had 4 straight games of 20 and 10 or more double doubles. It's the first time in 25 years anybody in the Big Ten's done that. He ended up with 19 and 7 tonight. Yep. So he had a good game. Yeah. You don't look at it and say, well, it was a disaster other than the turnovers, but he didn't do that. And he's been doing those kind of things lately. So that tells me Michigan State did the job. They did as much as you could have ever asked them to do.
No question.
In dealing with that kid, because he's just, and you saw it at times in this game, for as well as Michigan State played him, there would be moments, there would be certain possessions where there was just nothing you could do with him.
He's good.
Yeah. He's really, really good. And it's a credit to him that he has continued to progress and is playing his best basketball as a senior, and has just gotten better in every phase of the game. One other thing I thought was interesting, because this is a guy who's averaging 3 block shots a game. He didn't have any tonight. Yeah. IU as a team blocks a lot of shots. They had 1. Race Thompson got the 1 block. Michigan State only had 1 as well. Madi Sissoko with that
volleyball spike. That was awesome.
Could have drilled that through the Earth's core if that if we didn't have a hardwood floor. But yeah, Indiana really does rely on shot blocking as a defensive weapon. I mean, they're very good at it, and TJD is among the best there are. And for whatever reason, they didn't get that done tonight. I think some of that was the way Michigan State attacked them. You know, when they did penetrate, they went very strong for the most part. There wasn't a lot of this, you know, half fading away or uncertainty. It was hard takes to the rim. That's part of why they shot so many free throws, because they were aggressive, and you know, it just worked out. It was a great game.
Yeah, there were a number of times when Walker and AJ got under the hoop, and you're like, well, I guess they could try and get through that, but they didn't bother trying to challenge TJD.
Right.
But they, you know, got it back out to reset the offense. That was part of the problem in the first 12 minutes of the game. They were kind of getting penetration, but not anything that was productive. But to that to that point, though, is what is impressive is that they continued doing that, working inside the whole game. I mean, they ended up with 26 points in the paint to Indiana's 30. You would not expect a fairly even number there. And you know, to all the people who say, well, it's 5-on-4. You look at numbers. Sissoko has 2, Kohler has 4. It's not like the 5 produced a lot, but it was Malik Hall getting in the lane, Tyson Walker.
Yep.
And that's, you know, if you look at the numbers, you have Hogard with 5 assists and 3 turnovers, which is not like great numbers. He had most of turnovers early, but it was because of the way that the pick and roll was being played. They were just basically giving him the layup, and so he had to take it or go in and get fouled. And so they were very smart about that. I like that.
And that's a really good point too, that we shouldn't let go unaddressed. I thought Michigan State, both of their primary guards, AJ and Tyson, were great at getting, and Michigan State screeners too.
Yeah.
At running pick and roll, forcing a switch, and then just dusting TJD, who is, for a center, is a relatively mobile kid. You know, I don't think he's not Xavier Tillman, but he's not a bad pick and roll defender. But Michigan State's guards made him look bad.
Yeah.
With that, they were both of them. I mean, they both had multiple takes where they just went by him and finished.
And I also liked Malik Hall going inside. Now, he was not super productive from the field. He was 2 of 7, which is not very good. And he still gets a little bit those, you know, fadeaways that I think are probably ill-advised. But he attacked people who he had advantage on, Renault and Miller Kopp. You end up fouling Miller Kopp out of the game and just punishing him, and you know, went 6 for 6 from the line. So that was key to the game as well.
Yeah, the free throw, you're right. 2 for 7 doesn't look great, but he earned all those free throw attempts. And to put Kopp in foul trouble and eventually foul him out is big too, because you're leading the game, and the way Michigan State was, it was, you know, it got as close as 5, but was mostly played in the second half. After that initial burst out of the locker room, it was mostly played in, I would say, the, you know, 7 to 13 point range. So what's the way that an opponent can get back in the game against you facing that kind of deficit? Well, 3-point shooting. And Kopp is their best shooter. I mean, he's a real weapon. So to kind of have him off balance, I think he ended up with 6 points in the game. That's huge. And you're right, Malik had a lot to do with that, because Kopp was guarding him, and Malik was aggressive, and he earned what he got.
Yeah, and I thought there were times when Michigan State's got out in transition, especially during that burst at the end of the first half. That's really, although, you know, they're credited with 2 fast break points. I don't know, maybe that's accurate.
It's another way. I saw that too.
But it seems like they did more than that.
The eternal mystery. It's the eternal mystery. They were better than that transition. Well, they had one that was clearly that Hogard, Jaden Akins made a great play in the middle of the floor and got AJ sprung for a layup. But there were more than that. Yeah. If you want to call those secondary break, all right, but it starts to not mean very much, because you know what you saw. And I thought Michigan State did enough in transition that you could say it was a relatively, for a Big Ten game,
Yeah.
it was a relatively productive night.
Yeah, and then I guess the other thing you'd say is, from a turnover standpoint, we didn't have this as one of the keys, but Michigan State did not hurt themselves too badly there. They had 10 turnovers to Indiana's 13.
Yep.
And, 7 steals on Indiana, Aikens with 3 of them. So they disrupted Indiana a lot, and they really made it difficult. There was a number of assists that Trayce Jackson-Davis had. He had 5 assists, and he had some good passes to people who were open shooters in the corners a couple times. But largely, they made most of his passes really challenging and in traffic, and it just, that was the difference in the game of Indiana really getting going routinely.
Yeah, look, I'll freely admit that my philosophy on that would have been, well, he's going to get his. What you need to do is make sure that you limit the other guys, But the fact of the matter is, when you look at shot attempts, you look at free throw attempts, and basically no second chance opportunities for him, on offensive rebounds. And then you look at 7 turnovers. Michigan State did as good a job as you could have ever asked them to do in that matchup.
Yeah.
They really did. Just the totality of it. You'd go across the board and say, that's a good number for us. That's a good number for us. That's a good number for us.
Well, why don't we go ahead and go through your keys of the game?
Whether you're home or away, stay connected to your team with T-Mobile, the network that covers 99% of people in America. They've been investing billions to light up their best network ever. From your backyard to a sold-out stadium, get T-Mobile's best coverage yet. Plus, with T-Mobile, you get a price lock guarantee, so they won't raise the rate of your talk, text, and data, ever. There's never been a better time to switch. Visit your local T-Mobile store today. Coverage not available in some areas. Price lock exclusions like taxes, fees, select promos, and third-party services apply. See T-Mobile.com.
So the 5 keys of the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. If you need Spartan apparel, head on over to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. You can get 20% off your order for listeners of this show if you enter the coupon code Final4 at checkout. You can also get our gear. You can get a link to that, to our collection, which is both a t-shirt and a hoodie with Final Fours on the schedule logo. You can get that at our website. Just go to finalfoursontheschedule.com/merchandise. There you can get to the collection. You can also buy all your other Spartan gear, of course. They have car decals, fat heads that go on the wall. They've got stuff for cornhole, all sorts of things. And additionally, other schools besides Michigan State. So almost all the other schools in Michigan. So if you've got a house divided outside of someone who's a Wolverine, you can get your Spartan gear there and other gear as well. So again, go to nudgeprinting.com and get 20% off checkout by entering the coupon code Final4 on checkout. All right. So the first key to the game was emotion. I'll say, as we got to the game early because it turns out there's not as much traffic late at night. So we're in the stands early, and I was actually tearing up before the game. I did not expect that to happen. They were sort of going through things, the moment of silence and stuff. So it was very emotional for most people there at the stadium. I imagine. I don't feel like emotion was the problem early in that game. It just seemed like they just were, they just weren't work. It just wasn't working, as far as offense and stuff. And so maybe that was played into it. I don't know, but they at least managed it from that point on. And then, the crowd was into the game and stuff. So I don't know. I thought that went okay.
Yeah. What the reason was that they were lethargic early on offense. I can't say.
They've done it before, right? It's not like
yeah, you can't necessarily. That's true. You can't necessarily blame it on that, but I do think that once they got things rolling, once Walker and Kohler gave them a spark, it seemed to me. I mean, you were there, but I've already seen Izzo speak to the fact that he thought the crowd was outstanding, and really the whole thing just sort of fed on itself. And sometimes that's what you need. I mean, again, to return to the reality of it, in many ways, Indiana played a good game. This was not a situation where, as we talked about, Indiana has had some real problems playing on the road this year. In many respects, that was not the case tonight.
No, they shot well, everything.
They shot extremely well. the 13 turnovers maybe a little bit higher than they wanted, but it wasn't crazy. They just weren't as good as Michigan State. And I think that, again, once some positive things started to happen, then the crowd gets into it and the team is able to feed off that. But I think the bottom line is all the things I'm talking about were really in a basketball context.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like, and you were there, so you can disagree with me, but and you'd have a better read of it, but it didn't seem to me like it was anything that personally I feel gets a little bit outside the bounds of good taste. And being a good human, maybe more importantly, this, let's use this to fuel. I didn't sense that. This was about when that game started, this was about basketball, and that's what it should be about.
Yep. No question it was. Yep. It was, I'm sure people use it in different ways, outlets or distractions, et cetera. But yeah, it just definitely felt like a regular basketball game. And, hats off to Indiana as well for wearing the Spartan Strong shirts, both on the bench throughout the entire game. I mean, it was quite a nice gesture. And as far as the crowd goes, I mean, that place was packed. I mean, I know it was Indiana and it's a big game, but it's late at night. And so you sometimes wonder, but I don't know if they released a lot of tickets and just had the students fill the seats, because there are tons and tons and tons of students, especially in the upper bowl, like in the back. So I don't know I don't know how the ISON works, to be honest, as far as like if they have more seats and they just don't always show up every game, and so there are less students like in the upper bowl.
I think you have a problem staying in the group if you don't show up. That's always been my understanding.
I know there's like a lower and upper. I don't know. Anyway, it was jam packed and it was pretty cool. It was a great atmosphere, and so it was as shaky as it looked early. My wife and I were like, "Ooh, this looks bad," but then they turned it around and it turned out all right. So the second key to the game was a defensive game plan, and this involved Trayce Jackson-Davis, and I feel like, largely Michigan State did the same thing they did in Bloomington, except they just did it better. And they were able to maybe get on the shooters a little bit better, and they were able to disrupt Trayce Jackson-Davis. They didn't allow him, very rarely did he have like one-on-one opportunities against either Kohler or Sissoko. So, I don't know, it worked, whatever they did.
I think it was much better execution, and it was a little different in that the game in Bloomington, they did more in the way of conventional, double downs, where the 4-man doubles. This, after those first 5-6 minutes, was really just a lot of one-on-one defending with guards digging down, but varying, and we've seen it this year. I think that the key to doing that stuff effectively is, certainly with this team, is not being predictable.
Random, yes.
Varying when you're coming, varying the timing of it, varying even if you're coming. Whatever you have to do to keep that guy off balance, because, I mean, anybody who's listening to this, I'm sure, is watching enough basketball. They know, a guy who's a good low post player, and Trayce would qualify as that, certainly. It's a rhythm thing.
Yeah.
They literally feel it. They can feel when they've gotten into the spot they want to get to, where they're comfortable. It's timing. And if you can disrupt that timing, you can do some things to limit effectiveness. And that's exactly what we saw from Michigan State. Again, I'd say in that last game, I don't remember how many free throw attempts he had, but I know he made 11, and he was 10 for 20 from the floor for 31 points. In this game, he went 8 for 13 from the floor, 3 for 6 at the line for 19 points. Massive difference. And it wasn't because somebody else at Indiana got hot and carried it. Indiana was trying to play through him like they always do. It's just Michigan State's defensive game plan was executed well enough to make sure that he didn't take over the way he did in Bloomington. Yes, he had a good game. No, he did not dominate. And that was enough.
I feel like with just like in football, The offense is all rhythm, it's execution, and making sure people in the right place at the right time. It's timing. And the defense's job is to make sure you're connected, and then you disrupt things as much as you can wherever you can on the field, right? And it's not much different than basketball.
And one other thing worth mentioning about this, the concern you have, as we talked about in the preview, when you have to play that way, is can you avoid getting just repeatedly burned by jump shooters?
Right.
When you have to play a post guy that way. And in the first game in Bloomington, I used 9 for 16 from 3. This game, what were they? 5 for 14.
Yeah.
So more effective. But again, the biggest number there to me is the 14.
Yeah.
That they didn't allow IU to get a lot of clean looks. And we don't know what that would have looked like. Indiana has, over the course of the season, been a much worse 3-point shooting team on the road than they are at home. And, tonight,
they're pretty good.
5 for 14 is adequate. Yeah, it's not great, but it's not bad. You could live with it. So the key was holding that down. And then on top of all of that, you add in the fact that, as we talked about, you force Trayce Jackson-Davis into 7 turnovers. That's the defensive game plan. I don't care what the shooting numbers look like. The defensive game plan was executed well.
So the third key to the game was defensive rebounding. We already talked about this. Michigan State was fantastic. They limited Indiana to 19% offensive rebound percentage, which is very good. Michigan State was on, alternatively, which wasn't a key to the game, but was 34.4%, which is, I don't think either of us expected that sort of performance on the offensive board. So complete domination there, 33-24. So it wasn't even.
Yeah. And look, it's worth noting that, Michigan State's had these occasional blips where when they have a bad defensive rebounding game, it tends to just not be, like that Ohio State game was an exception, where they gave up 12 and it was, Ohio State didn't do a ton of damage with it. You felt like, well, it wasn't great, but it's survivable. Most of the time when Michigan State has a bad defensive rebounding game, it's like apocalyptically bad.
Yeah.
It's like that Rutgers game at Breslin where Michigan State still won, giving up, I think it was 18 offensive rebounds. The Michigan game was really the first time all year that I can recall where I felt like offensive rebounding by an opponent actually cost them a game.
Yeah, no question.
But with these occasional blips, it is worth keeping in mind. This has actually been a pretty good defensive rebounding team, much better than they've been over the last 3-4 years.
Yeah.
I think the reason people have this impression, as I've seen coming out of the Michigan game in some quarters, that they're a bad rebounding team. Well, no, that's not true. They're a bad offensive rebounding team. They are not a bad defensive rebounding team, despite what has happened in an occasional game here or there. Tonight was maybe a little better than you would expect, but it was more in keeping with what they've been for the bulk of this season.
Yeah,
it really was. But it's important that happens, and that you didn't let TJD really get anything going in terms of, taking the game over on the offensive glass, which he is capable of doing. Was great work by Jaxon Kohler and Mady Sissoko.
Yeah, I thought, even though Mady only had 3 rebounds, he was actually this happened.
He was better.
He was better than that. He prevented other people from getting the rebounds, and then Akins would clean it up or something like that. So, but I think Akins had 4, right. Hall had 5 rebounds, 3 of those defensive. So you're getting a lot of rebounds outside, and Hauser, of course, with his usual 8. I mean, so you're getting a lot of rebounding outside that 5 position, and then of course, Kohler did it at 7. I mean, most of them are offensive, but so I mean, a good team effort there for sure.
Well, look, it's you raise a very good point. Yes, the rebounding numbers matter, but it doesn't tell the whole story. You have to actually watch the game to have a sense of what kind of job was done by certain individuals. And the fact is, Trayce Jackson-Davis had 7 rebounds in this game. He came in averaging he's over 11.
Double.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as we said, 20 plus and 10 plus in 4 straight games. MSU's 2 5 men did the job.
Yeah, they kept him at
They
bay.
didn't put up. Yeah, they kept him occupied. And when he's not able to get in position to grab a board, that makes it available for the Hausers and the Aikens and the Halls, So it's not just how many did Jackson get, how many did Marty get. It's if you watch the game, you should have come away from it understanding those guys both did a great job, even putting their actual numbers aside, because they occupied him. They didn't let him dominate.
Yeah.
And then that's a fair fight. At that point, if it's Hauser and Hall and Aikens going up against, Thompson and Galloway and Hood Schifino, I'm okay with that.
No question. Yeah. So 4th key to the game, the threes. Well, Michigan State hit 10. So, 10 out of 21. They had one kind of miss late in the game. So they're about 50%. You hit 10, just like Indiana hit 9 on their floor. You're going to win most games, barring, disasters in other parts of your game. So that was obviously a huge key to the game and why they won so easily.
It's what they do. And we talk about this consistently, right? That the frequency of, or maybe more than the frequency, the importance of having a sufficient output from 3 is critical to MSU's overall offensive success. It is the single best thing they do offensively, bar none. Yeah. And that doesn't mean they've got to shoot whatever they did, 47%, whatever it was. They don't have to do it at that level, but there's got to be production. They can't afford, a game where they don't make a 3 or where they're, 3 for obviously, 3 for 17, something like that. It's going to make it difficult for them to win. So there's a point, and where that threshold is maybe is a little bit variable from game to game, but it's in my opinion, it's somewhere in the, 6 to 7 makes range at a minimum.
Sure. Yeah.
I think
so.
That they need. I think that's probably a fair number. This game, look, I think that a lot of it was a result of after a certain point. Early on, Tyson Walker hit a couple where he basically manufactured shots and hit them, tough shots. Yeah. But after that, it was really Michigan State doing the things you need to do in terms of running your offense to generate good looks, good penetration, good ball movement, active bodies, and also some smart play. And I'll give you an example of one. There was a sequence where I think Hauser missed a 3 and Mahdi fought TJD off to get an offensive rebound. And Jaden Aikens did a great job of relocating near he wasn't quite in the corner, but he was near it to make himself available for a kick and a wide open 3. And of course, you'll always hear people say it gets said so frequently that it's a cliche, but it's a cliche because there's some truth in it. Oftentimes, the best 3-point shot you get is off an offensive rebound. And that was an example of it, but it was not just Mahdi's work. That was important, but it was also Jaden being smart enough to relocate, make himself available for an easy kick out so that he had a wide open 3. And of course he buried it. So it was all those things kind of coming together to make Michigan State to lead to the kind of performance that they had from 3. And, clearly it was a huge difference between these two teams.
Yeah. And Joey, who'd been shooting the lights out, has really struggled in this game from 3 in some respects. He was 2 for 7, which is, much below where he usually is, but it didn't matter because everyone else was so good, Walk, Tyson, 5 for 7. Finally, guards. Well, I think we talked about this. Hood Schifino was good, but Hogard and Walker were better, and I think that was the difference than the Indiana guards.
What did 43 points between the two? 45. Yeah. That's right, because AJ got that last bucket. Yeah. 45. I used 2 starting guards.
27.
27. Not bad, but not Look, Michigan State, in my mind, now Northwestern can make an argument. I think Rutgers, when they're healthy, can make an argument too. But I think if you take the three of Walker, Hogard, and Akins, there is not another backcourt that I would trade those guys for. Now that doesn't mean that they dominate every game. AJ has got to be the version, and it seems to be like AJ has broken through.
Yeah, I think so too.
That period of time where he was not playing well. Again, you said it was like 5-3 tonight doesn't feel great, but man, he played well. I don't care what those numbers say. I thought this was a great floor game from AJ Hogard tonight. It really felt that way to me. I still think Michigan State, when push comes to shove, has the best guards in the Big Ten. I really do. I understand there, Northwestern certainly can talk about their guys, and, as I said, Rutgers and, maybe one or two others can try to make that a discussion. But I think a night like tonight, you see it. And Michigan State at their best just has a gear that I don't know that I think these other teams match. And they play both ends too, which is true of Northwestern and Rutgers guys also. But this trio is not just at the offensive end. We know that. They go out and they guard people too. Yeah. It was the difference. They didn't have Trayce Jackson-Davis just dominate the way he oftentimes can. And then on the other hand, even though Indiana's guards were pretty good, Michigan State's guards were great. And that was the difference.
Well, Michigan State will head to Iowa City on Saturday, and we'll be back with the pregame show in a couple days. I'd like to remind you, for a programming note, that Coach Garland will be on the show after the Iowa game, so he'll help us break down the game, and hopefully it's another victory for Michigan State. I'd also like to
well, let's remember, the last time we had him on was a road game at Penn State. So we're going to assume that he is that is a good luck omen for Michigan State. Luck omen.
And Iowa plays tomorrow night on Wednesday, and they will play at Wisconsin, and then they return back home to take on Michigan State. So both teams will be fairly well rested for that game, which has not been typical this season sometimes. So again, reminder to check out your gutters. If you have any problems, give Kurt a call. If you're living on the west side of the state, at Brothers That Just Do Gutters. And then also, if you need some Spartan gear, go to Nudge Printing. We have a $5 gift card that we'll give you if you leave a written review on your podcast player. Even if you don't want the gift card, please leave a written review on your podcast player. But you can send a screenshot of it to me at eric@tffinots.com. I'll get that to you so you can take that off your order, in addition to the great discount you get by typing Final Four on your coupon code. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.